Okay. A little past 4:30. All of our esteemed membership is present. And we can start the Monday, June 3 meeting of Park and Recreation Committee. And I'm wondering if there are any public comments or suggestions. I think Mr. Horder might have a little bulletin for us.
Started up so fast, didn't have my computer ready. Yes, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Ready, okay. Patrick Herder from Wausau area. We live in Weston now, but we want back. Anyway, with JoJo's Jungle, all-inclusive playground. After 4 years, we finally decided fundraising, we've had enough of it, so we've made the project to a point where just after $2 million of funds raised, we were able to adjust the project scope to meet all of our goals, but achieve a budget right within where we have our fundraising at $2,041,000. And have been working now with Jamie on the beginning of the construction phase. So this is kind of an announcement to say we are done on the fundraising and are beginning construction this summer. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, our timeline that we're working on some adjustments to the plan with the soccer field that's there. And then with the adjustments that Patrick made as well with some of the equipment move. Well, the equipment really didn't move. There were some items that were taken out, but the play value is also there. We're excited. Our goal is to try to break ground by the end of June, working with Myron on that. And then try to get the port in place in yet this year. It's a really big playground, so it's all going to depend on when the installers can come to install it. But that would be the goal. If we don't get it in by early October, then we'll most likely wait till the spring like we did with River Life, but that is our goal.
Do you have the option if somebody comes out there and says, this is really great, I'll give you another 10 grand or whatever to add items?
In what we have is we're phasing the water feature portion of it. To meet this goal, we have a contingency fund within JoJo's Jungle, the construction project, that the water feature fits into. But if we end up eating into that contingency fund, we would have to do additional fundraising in order to be able to add the water feature as a second phase. So certainly in that regard, we can. We don't have any other pieces that we excluded from it, but we would definitely work with other ideas with the Parks Department on what could be added if somebody did do something like that, if it fits within our goals and makes sense. We don't have anything specific that we offer, though.
Okay, super. Any questions, comments from the committee, other than Wausau?
Is that?
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
If all had time to, anybody else with public comment or suggestion? Okay. Any comments or questions on the minutes? Yes, sir.
I think we have one little typo at the top of the third page of the minutes. Riverside Park, it's comparing apples to oranges because there may be BOCs, and I think that would probably have to be VOCs.
She's got that one, yeah.
Oh,
Very
okay.
good.
All right.
Yeah, it's volatile organic compound. Very good. Anything else? Move to approve, or you have a question? Very good.
When we talk about these minutes, we throw in a paragraph every now and again. I mean, you look at on the second page, discussion, possible action. There's got to be, I forget how many words. You know, a paragraph makes it easier to read if you break them up every now and again.
Very good. We like easy. Anything else? Motion to approve. Mr. Neal and Mr. Nutting, thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. We have the meat of the afternoon, the discussion and possible action regarding the Phase 1 environmental assessment for Riverside Park. In hindsight, I would have liked to have invited Mr. Lassa, but I don't know how much he can add. I guess if maybe Jamie could give us her understanding where we're at, and I don't know if Eric has anything that he's burning to contribute. I go first?
Yes, we did invite Mr. Lessa. He happened to be on vacation today, so there wasn't, we asked for somebody else from REI to possibly come, and he said there wasn't anybody that he would put on this, but Mr. Fable and Mr. Lindman have been looking at this. This is their area of expertise as well, so they'll be able to give us an overview. I wanted to make one correction to my agenda summary page where I put in there that in section 8.2, REI recommends that the city continue to allow access for ongoing investigation and groundwater sampling related to the park. That is correct, and that we'll talk about section 8.2 as to what REI actually is recommending for us. But then the next sentence is not supposed to go with that 8.2. This was a item that I put in there based on the direction that the committee had given me at the last month's meeting, where we are to coordinate with TRC to conduct additional sampling. That should have been another paragraph that I put in there to go with the fact that I did contact TRC to let them know if we were to do additional sampling that we may want to piggyback with them. But that is not, it looks like it's a recommendation of REI, and it's not. That was part of the committee's direction to me last month. So just wanted to clarify that for you as Mr. Fable gives us an overview of the outcome. I think he's
Very
best
good.
to talk about it.
And if you could give us your job description or whatever, Kevin, I don't think we all know you.
Kevin Fable, environmental engineer with City of Wausau.
Very good. What should we take away from this, or what, you know?
Okay, I know there's around 1,500 pages of information that was provided to you in the Phase 1. Much of that is what you would call backup documentation or appendices and required by ASTM standard for a Phase 1. And it also is a lot of the information that was looked at by REI as part of compiling of the Phase 1 and also included in there for reference as you're reading through the report. But to summarize the Phase 1, I would like to turn to two sections. If you could look to those, it's sections 8.2 and 8.3.
What is
And
the
there,
page number?
32.
I have 32 on mine, but I don't know if it numbered differently as I printed, but I do have page 32 on mine.
I do also.
It's 32 of the document, not 32 of the packet, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Of the document, yes.
Okay, hang on a minute.
Okay. And what I'd like to do is start with 8.3 before getting to 8.2, so.
No, keep going, this way. Go to the beginning of the document. Like way before.
Yeah.
Okay, now after that.
Or wait, go down.
Yep,
Keep going down quite a bit.
yeah, you're on 23, so now you see the bottom page numbers, that's 32, go to.
After all the
Yes,
photos?
keep going. No, okay. Oh, okay, you're at 6.1 now, so just a little bit further. Keep going down.
There, this page, oh, keep on, one more.
Okay, section 8.3, I'd like to start with. What a Phase 1 does is it takes a look at a lot of information sources. It looks at the property itself, past uses of the, past uses of the property, and also past uses of the neighboring properties, current uses of the neighboring properties, and any potential environmental concerns that could be a result of either the current or past use of the property or any current or past uses of neighboring properties which could impact the property that you're looking at. After a review of this material, and this the property itself was looked back all the way back to around the 1880s for historical use of the property and surrounding properties. The Phase 1 looks to come up with potential areas of concern, and those areas of concern are referred to as recognized environmental conditions, or RECs. So what the Phase 1 did was look for any RECs through the last 140 years that would have impacted the Riverside Park property. And Section 8.3 summarizes the RECs that the Phase 1 did identify. And I'll just briefly go through those. If you want to go into any more detail or have questions about any one particular one, just speak up. But the first one is a potential REC, just based on the fact that there was an industrial use of the property back in the late 1880s. It was used as a tannery and also I believe it was a wood treatment area, or excuse me, it was a tannery. And because it was industrial and not residential, they identify that as a recognized environmental condition, just based on the fact that there was an industrial site there at one time. So in addition to the RECs, they also come up with any recommendations to deal with those RECs. So there's no to-do list, or there's no recommendations based on that REC. It's just noted as a concern. The second one identifies a petroleum spill from the 3M company, which is adjacent to the park. That petroleum spill has been documented with the DNR. The DNR has managed that site, and all the requirements of 3M based on that petroleum spill have been met, and that site has been closed out. So the Phase 1 identifies that as a REC, but once again, since that remediation is closed out, no further action is necessary as a
Okay.
result.
Excuse me, Kevin. On that one, in the text that was mentioned that there have been annual inspections on the 3M side of the property line, and it is closed, but it doesn't mention any inspections on our side. Have there been any? Was a determination made that they weren't necessary, or?
What those inspections are, it's a cover inspection. So even though the site is closed, once a year you have to look at the site to make sure that the cover is still intact, there's no erosion taking place, or any items like that, which would require you to do some maintenance and replace the cap. There's a cap on the site which prevents, on the 3M portion of it, which prevents rainwater soaking through the petroleum that is still in the soil, and then making a further plume extending out from that initial contamination area. So to answer your question, the cap is over the initial petroleum spill area, which is on the 3M property.
Okay, and that inspection can be done through somebody's windshield. They don't have to get out of their car, they just have to,
To do it properly, you should at least get out, walk around to make sure that,
okay,
for instance, a parking lot can function as a cap. You should at least go out into the parking lot to make sure there's not a crack or a pothole or something that would allow rainwater to seep through the cap material.
okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
But the last sentence says, however, since groundwater contamination was documented to extend onto the park property, this would be considered an REC. So although it's a CREC on the 3M property, it's an REC on the park property.
Okay,
It remains a concern.
That is correct.
right.
So it would be, and what that would identify is someone interested in the property would want to know that the groundwater underneath the property has some level of contamination in it.
Very good.
On to the next REC. It is the groundwater contamination in relation to the Walico property. That is the groundwater contamination as a result of the Penta. And that paragraph identifies that release, and also the fact that because that plume does extend into the groundwater onto the Riverside Park property, that makes that an REC as well. On to the next REC that also relates to the Walico property, and that identifies the concern that was recently brought up about the 400 tons per month of wood waste burned in the facility. and the possibility of aerial deposition of pollutants as a result of that burning. It also identifies the fact that Waleco submitted an aerial dispersion model to DNR, and based on that aerial dispersion model, DNR will be requesting some testing of Waleco to be done over the summer. Once again, with that REC, no further action is required on our part as a result of that REC at this time.
Mr.
And-
Chair?
Yes, sir.
So the information given to the DNR for them to review and recommend testing, this testing would extend to properties off of 3M, or off of the Waleco site, I should say.
Correct.
So the DNR could say, we would like testing over, in this quadrant of the park, or what have you.
Right, based on the aerial dispersion model, or where, they run a model of where a particle coming out of that smokestack would likely be deposited. Based on the likelihood of that deposition, that's where they would want the sampling done to determine if any of those particles had resulted in contamination.
And we've not seen that spray chart yet, per se?
That, the modeling has been submitted to DNR. DNR does have that.
But staff hasn't seen it, we haven't seen it, of course. Just curious, as to the nature of it, I'm assuming there's going to be some kind of cone coming off the emissions site, it's going to spread east, northeast, east, and southeast, essentially. But, on a windy day, it'll carry Lord knows how far, and on a still day, it could just fall down on the ground right there.
And that is taken into account in the modeling.
Right, okay, because they're going to look at not just prevailing winds, but, variations in winds over time and all.
They actually take individual meteorological data and
So
look.
you'll get like a concentration, chart, if you will. It'll be darker here and lighter there.
Right, not only in the directional wise, but in the distance out from the stack as well.
Okay, thanks.
And then based on those concentrations, and the probabilities of pollution being in a certain area or not being in a certain area, that's where you would recommend sampling locations.
And Kevin, if I read that right, the preliminary spotting for where they would suggest, are those the data gap samples, is that what they're called?
There's information as to pollution or pollutant concentrations in certain spots. If there is a spot where they don't have data for, then they would ask for that spot to be sampled just to fill in the gaps.
Okay, and did I see that they've only selected one spot in Riverside Park?
In Riverside Park, correct, there is one spot being proposed for sampling.
Okay, so how do we get a recommendation on what we might want to do beyond that? And maybe I'm getting ahead of...
I think I'm getting to that in
Okay.
8.2, but
Very good.
if I'm not answering your question, please
Okay,
ask
go
me.
ahead.
Okay, and then finally, the last REC identified relates to the information that was provided to the Department of Health and Safety as it relates to sampling information from the park itself. This REC states that DHS did take a look at that information and did make the determination that that contamination would not have, or would not be a concern to anyone using the park. But because that is out there, that also is listed as an REC. And the model, or the sampling, which will be conducted by Waleco, will add to that database, and that's why they kept it open as a REC.
Okay.
So with that, if anyone has any questions on the RECs themselves, I'll take those. Otherwise, I would move on to section 8.2.
This is kind of an extraneous thing that doesn't really matter to the process here, but the number being included here at the top of this page is that they may have burned 400 tons per month of wood products.
Correct?
I'm trying to figure out how they would ever do that and still get any product out the door if they're burning 400 tons of wood. I mean, it just seems like an incredible number.
Well, I worked at Mosinee Paper for a while, and I mean, they burned,
Do you believe it?
oh, yeah, well, I mean, we had a wood waste boiler there as well, and they were burning about 100 tons a day,
Okay,
so.
very good. Mr. Gissel?
And I understand the 5 bullet points. I think it was in 2018 that there was some issues with regard to the air pollutants coming out of 3M. I think there was a Milwaukee Journal article and a variety of other things with regard to the DNR, talking to 3M about some of the air pollutants. Is there a reason why that wasn't part of this, or the air pollution from 3M didn't seem to be a part of these conclusions or the study as far as I could see? I didn't see all 1,400 pages, but is there a reason, or do we know, or?
That violation, it was a violation of their Title V air permit, and it didn't deal as much with actual emissions as it dealt with negligent record keeping of their air pollution control devices. So that would be my guess as to why it wouldn't be included. The violation of their Title V air permit was a record keeping type violation, not a environmental release of such. Does that make sense, or?
Well, I'm just quoting from the newspaper story. It says the documents also, January, March, the DNR notified 3M that the company had not reported emissions for some industrial, and I realize this is from processes for two pollutants, methanol and volatile organic compounds during 2016 and 2017.
And once again, that's a reporting violation. So under normal operations, they're continually emitting these pollutants. But in that year or in that period of time, they failed to include it on a report.
So they are,
So they're allowed to emit those pollutants. It's the fact that they didn't
Didn't
report,
report them.
right? Does that make sense? It's
it
kind
makes
of,
sense to me.
Okay.
There's certain, can you talk a little bit about the levels then that are coming out of those smokestacks?
I assume they're within permitted levels. I don't know numbers, but they're allowed to emit certain levels, and they're compliant with what they're allowed to emit.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 8.2, which is, after all the 1,497 pages, this is what we asked the environmental expert to do, is take a look at the information with the site and provide us an opinion of what they recommend we do next. And they've summarized it into 2 bullet points. And the summary of those bullet points as to what's included in the environmental expert's opinion are the following. The first one is that we continue to allow access for the groundwater sampling in Riverside Park from the groundwater contamination that was a result of the Walico Penta event. And the second item is to also cooperate and allow access by TRC consultants in order to complete their DNR required sampling as an investigation for the Walico wood waste dispersion modeling sampling event, which would be this summer. And those are the 2 conclusions. And then they also, in addition to allowing access, they recommend that we allow TRC access to do the sampling for Walico, and then also await the results of the DNR review of those sampling results and see what DNR comes up with after receiving the sampling information. And equally as important as to what they recommend we do, I'd also like to touch on what they don't recommend we do. And the items that aren't included in the opinion are they do not recommend that the city conducts any additional sampling in addition to what TRC will be doing on behalf of Walico. They don't recommend that the city dictates how TRC samples, where those samples are conducted, the quantity of those samples, and what to sample for. The recommendation by the environmental expert leans in the direction of allowing TRC to do the sampling, awaiting those results, and then allowing DNR to review those results, and then at that time, go from there. So that,
I saw the look on your face, Mr. Chair, and I have the same look like inside mine.
Yeah, like,
It just seems like,
are you kidding?
yeah, we should
sorry.
not have
Did they
interest
say,
or
did I
input.
miss someplace in this document where they said, don't do any further sampling? Or are you just saying
I'm just
this
sta-
was not stated?
I'm stating what isn't a part of their recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, I kind of heard that they're recommending that we don't
No,
do
no.
these things, but you're
No.
saying that
They don't
saying that
recommend
doing
that
those
we
things
did.
are not part of the recommendation.
Correct.
It's kind of like all right, a positive, negative.
Okay. That's quite.
Okay,
Yeah.
when it talks about one sample location proposed inside the park, to your mind, does that mean one sample, spot, one place, one hole in the ground or whatever? Or is it a location in the park in which there'd be a series of samplings taken? And what is a location in the park? A location in the park might be the northern half or the southern half or, a square foot. I don't know what a location is.
A location is a sample point, so in answer to your question, it's a lot closer to one sample location, one hole, one sample, through a variety of depth, but as far as a latitude, longitude, it would be one location. And then based on that, you would take the result. What that sample location is the most likely spot where any contamination would occur. So if they take that sample and it comes back clean, you can defer that. If the worst case spot comes back clean, more than likely any other spot would also be. But if they come back, if they take the worst case sample and they have a hit or find something, then there would be a second iteration after DNR's review, and then they would spread out from that spot to try to determine what's there.
And this is directly related to the aerial deposition.
Correct.
In the text was a reference to Department of Health Services recommendation that we do further testing so we could be more certain of what we've got there. Shouldn't we do more testing?
That further testing, the Waleco sampling is part of that further testing. If the Waleco sampling comes back in this worst-case location and shows that that spot is clean, then based on what has been done in the past and based on this additional sampling, you would have no reason to do further investigation based on what you had available. There would be nothing indicating that there was a potential for contamination there.
I think there are people in the community and people in this room who would not be satisfied with a single test and, being told it's most likely that there's not going to be a problem as long as this one spot's okay.
And in answering that, I would defer to the experts. There's a lot of opinions, but DNR has the scientists on board to look at a site like that and look at the modeling and come up with a game plan to figure out if contamination exists. So if the experts are telling us that that's what they need to make that determination, then I have to trust the experts.
Okay, my sense is that this document was prepared by REI, not the DNR, so I don't see here where the DNR is saying, hey, just do your one test and you're good.
The DNR is saying do your one test in their approval of Waleco's plan that was submitted to DNR.
Okay, and that would satisfy the concern about the aerial deposition and stuff like that, but it wouldn't concern contaminated soil in the park or, it's just that plume. I don't think that's enough. I don't know how the committee feels.
Well, When you reference the plume, are you talking about the
groundwater.
plume from the smoke, or the groundwater? Well, we
Yeah.
know there's groundwater contamination there. And
Right.
we already know that. And we know that the groundwater contamination exists at X amount of feet beneath the park. I mean, but that's been defined, and we know that's there. So I guess I don't know the reasoning for further sampling to confirm that the groundwater contamination, because that's already being studied and under the direction of DNR has been defined.
I think, like, if you just look at the soil contamination, what I expected to come out of this was that, okay, you've got a spot there that has been tested right below the culvert where the water comes in on that slope. And so I expected to hear somebody say, well, from there you should go up 50 feet and 150, and then 50 and 150, and with those 4 additional tests, you should have a handle on what's happening with that stuff. Not, hey, you're pretty good right now.
And what the Phase 1 did, it looked at all the factors and all the history, and it did, if the Phase 1 would have identified a concern, as you just described, the Phase 1 in the opinion section would have recommended, we recommend that you do further testing around the area of the culvert to make sure of the fact that there's not a risk there. So the fact that the Phase 1 in their opinion section doesn't recommend that states to the fact that the environmental expert didn't feel that that was necessary.
Yes.
I just wanted to add, I found it in the packet, the study from TRC and on behalf of Waleco that was given to the DNR about their modeling and where those testings are. It begins on page 109 of the packet. It doesn't have a number on the bottom of the page, but if you're on the online packet of our agenda summary, it's page 109, and then the subsequent pages after, it shows where, yes, so starting there is the memorandum for that, and if we keep going down, Jody, there is a aerial colored picture of where they're recommending those additional testing sites are, including the one that's in the park, correct?
Yeah.
I have a
So-
question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You say that there's groundwater contamination in Riverside Park. That's correct, right?
Beneath it, correct.
Okay, so explain to us how groundwater gets contaminated.
Well, in general, or the case of Waleco?
Well, let's say, in general, how does water, groundwater get contaminated?
Okay, for instance, let's say you had a area of dirt in your backyard or at your business, and you spilled a 5-gallon bucket of solvent on that area of dirt. And then you get a rainstorm, and the rain, before you could clean up the contamination, washes that contamination into the soil. Now that contamination is contained in the soil. And after periods of rain upon rain upon rain, as the water goes down into the groundwater table, it collects that contamination with it. So the rainwater traveling through the soil column into the groundwater table takes that contamination with it, dissolved in the rainwater, and then when it hits the groundwater flows. So the contamination will go straight down into the table, but once it hits the table, it flows laterally to wherever it ends up, based on the gradient of the land.
Okay, using your instance, let's say you spill something, but you don't spill it once a day. You spill it again and again and again.
Okay?
Does one rain wash all that away, or does it take subsequent many rains to wash that down into the table?
Each rain is different, each area of soil is different. If it's a sandy soil, it goes down much quicker. If it's a clay, it takes much longer to penetrate into the soil. Basically, the speed of the water going through the soil dictates how fast that contamination travels with it.
Okay, so if Riverside Park was contaminated through particles in the air or stuff that's washed out of the culvert there, it could be ongoing. In other words, the rain could wash it away, then it could be deposited again, more rain would wash that away, and then it could be deposited again, and then more rain would wash that away into the table, right? So we don't know then if all of the contaminants that exist in that soil or exist on the top of it have actually been washed into the water table. They could still be there, could they not?
The types of contamination resulting from burning wood waste are not, they don't dissolve in water. They're more particle-based, they're more metal-based, they're not solvent or VOC-based. For the contamination to travel with the rainwater into the groundwater table, the contamination has to dissolve in water, basically.
Okay.
So any ash or any particulate matter that you would get from burning wood or waste would not dissolve in water, like a solvent or like a gasoline would.
Okay,
Does that make sense, or is that?
thank you.
If I may, I think you're talking the groundwater contamination that is already sunk into the water table, and then the testing that's being done, proposed, that's being required of Waleco is the aerial deposition from the smokestack, so two different critters.
Yeah, I understand that, but I still am of the belief that some of that contamination has come from 3M and continues to come from 3M through that culvert
Okay.
in certain areas.
I guess circle back a little bit. It seems like the DNR's part of this has been to review and possibly approve Waleco's plan to deal with the aerial deposition of contaminants from their site. And the DNR didn't review or make a recommendation on what we should do in the park. I mean, it's like, for DNR is saying, yes, Waleco, this looks like a good plan. You got your wind directions and all that stuff, and you got your calculations on how far the particulates are going to travel before they drop to the ground. But that doesn't help us in the park. I mean, they weren't reviewing that with us in mind. They were reviewing that with that site in mind and aerial deposition of nasties.
Well, they were reviewing it with, first they looked at the modeling and figured out where the wood waste contamination could have potentially impacted. And based on the area that the pollution could have impacted, that's where they determined they wanted more information in the form of sampling. If there was an area that they felt wouldn't have been contaminated based on meteorological data, then there would be no need to require sampling if there was the probability of the contamination from that source did not exist.
Okay, I guess I would like, maybe have to drag on to another meeting, but I would like Mr. Lasse's reaction to a question about, what can the city of Wausau do to further explore the potential potential spread of contamination in Riverside Park in the soil, on the top 2 inches, et cetera. And he acknowledges the Department of Health Services recommends further testing to be more confident that there's, no unreasonable risk in using the park. But you would think that we would want to do more than that one spot, because the Department of Health Services is telling us that. And he sounds like he's agreeing with the Department of Health Services. He's, acknowledging, he's bringing up their recommendation, but he's not saying you should do 4 more tests or 3 more tests or something.
You can always test. I mean, you can always test as much as you want. But part of the decision comes into the the cost of that testing and the information that you're likely to obtain, or to garner from it. And if the information you're likely to garner from the testing is going to be redundant or information that you already know, then that impacts your decision differently than if it's testing an area that you don't know. So that all factors into the decision that you guys have to make, is that if the testing was free, you'd do all the testing in the world you wanted to get all the information you could. But the testing does come with a cost, and you have to determine if the information that you expect to get from that testing is worth the cost of doing that testing.
Do you have a handle on how much we've spent so far with the authorization with this phase one?
If you don't hold me to it, I would estimate around $7,000.
Okay. And then if we wanted further testing, say soil testing for the pentachlorophenol and heavy metals, is that like $1,000 a pop?
How many samples would you, just roughly?
Does the cost vary with the number? You get
Yes.
a volume discount?
Yes. Well, no, it goes the other way. The more samples you want, the higher the cost.
The lower the cost per sample, or they stay the same? Say we wanted 6.
You're probably looking at $30,000 to $40,000.
For 6 samples?
Correct.
Okay. So part of my thinking is that, when we talk about this stuff, we're not talking with a bunch of engineers who can look at a spot and say, well, that test there, and scientifically they know that if that's at X level, that if you go out from there, it's going to be, X minus something, that's going to decrease. But we're not dealing with a bunch of engineers, we're dealing with lay people who are concerned about this, so I'm not sure. Committee members, what are your thoughts?
I would think
Mr.
that
Smith?
we have to look past the dollars and look at the health of the people that live down that area, the people that are going to use the park. I mean, we give away pieces of property that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So spending $30,000 to make sure that the people that live in that area or the people that are going to use that park are safe, that's chicken feed compared to what we actually spend. You can't put a price on people's lives or their well-being.
But another thing to consider too is if you take 6 samples in the middle of in Riverside Park, you've gotten information from 6 points. Someone could say, well, you did a sample here, you did a sample here. How do I know that the area right between those two isn't contaminated? And you don't, unless you do 12 samples or unless you do 50 samples. You're never going to know for sure if every square inch of that park is clean unless you sampled every square inch. But at some point, you have to determine what level of information do you need to be comfortable with the fact that if this information shows me that there's no concern, then I can defer from that information that the rest of the park is safe.
I think
Well,
you
I
hit the
think a lot
nail
of
on the
us-
head. Go ahead.
I think a lot of us aren't comfortable yet. I think a lot of the people that have been involved in the citizens group aren't comfortable yet. Now, maybe we don't have to test every square inch, and what you say is quite true. I could test here, I could test there, and I get nothing. And there could be 6 spots in there. But what we have to do is to try to be as reasonable as we can, and I think the people that are concerned about this would understand if we're trying to, they can't understand we can't do every square inch. But we can make an effort to ease their minds as much as we can, and everybody's minds, that there's not any danger down there. I think once we do that, if it takes 12 more tests, I think the people are reasonable enough to say, okay, we're comfortable with that. It'll work. But, I'm concerned, and I don't want to disrespect you, but, you to me, have somewhat of a cavalier attitude that, well, we can't test every place, so we just shouldn't test anywhere. I'm not buying that.
No, what I'm trying to say is that if you test 6 points in Riverside Park,
Yeah.
you'll have 6 points. And will that give you the level of confidence to say that the entire park is safe?
Well, no, it probably won't, but let's face it, the people that have been doing these tests for a week, they're not testing every square inch either.
Right.
So why are you comfortable with their results?
Because the experts at the DNR have reviewed it, and they're the experts on the matter, and I am relying on what the experts have to say.
I say this before and I'll say it again. The Titanic was built by experts too, and we saw what happened there.
One of the, you did mention something earlier that reminded me, you said you will never be certain that if we do 6 tests, that we missed one in the middle or something, and we've had, we're dealing with human nature here, and we've had a citizen in this room saying, as somebody who kind of believes in science, it drives you a little crazy, but the guy said, you've tested to the right of me, you've tested to the left of me, but you haven't tested my lot, so I'm not good with this. And so that's the kind of the thinking that people have when it deals to this stuff they can't see in the ground.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me like if we say, well, we're just, and maybe our course of action should be to see what Waleco discovers and then decide rather than to, join in and, skip down the lane with them. But I don't know, other members of the committee? Mr. Gissel, you want to react to that?
Just one more thing. Part of the problem is everyone's comfort level is different. Someone may be comfortable with 4, some people may be comfortable with the information they have. Some people wouldn't be comfortable unless you had 10 samples. Some people may need 100. Some people may never be comfortable, even if you did 1,000. Everyone's comfort level is different. So the hardest part is to come up with a comfort level that is the right answer. And no one can give you the right answer.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
Yeah. And if it was me, and I knew that the source of the contamination was here, and I lived here, and you tested here, and it was okay, then I'm good. But
And the next person might say, well, no, I want another
so
one right
much.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. G?
Well, I, for one, am not willing to skip down the lane with Waleco at this point in time. So I think that I agree with you. I think that it depends on where we do the 6, there are some key points in Riverside Park with regard to where the people are. If you go in the bushes on the north side, way up on the hill, I don't know what you're going to find, but if you go down where the people are, parking lots, where the people hanging out, I think we should be able to get what we're looking for. I think that would satisfy where we are. And I agree, Mr. Chair, I think if you want to lead this effort, I agree with you that we should continue to set our own pace here and do what we have to do, agreeing with Mr. Smith, and go forth.
Mr. Neal? Want to weigh in? I'd like to hear from everybody.
Well, right now, I'm assuming we're, again, only talking about aerial dispersion, deposition testing, right? We've gone past any talk about, dioxin downhill from the drain pipe. It's always been a concern of mine because, sure, they've tested at the mouth and they found heightened levels, but then they said, well, but that's up in the bushes and nobody's apt to go there, and you have to go up there and eat dirt for you to have a problem. But again, I'm thinking that it goes downhill from there. Does it all disperse or does it pool somewhere? Does it pool somewhere where it's accessible? I don't know, but it seems to me that's just something we'd want to know. Is there pooling of dioxin somewhere where, is it where somebody stands on the side of the river fishing, and sits down for a shore lunch? Is that something that I should be concerned about or not? Well, I am concerned. I have no idea because I know that up the hill, there's a source. I just don't know what's happened over years and years of that source dripping down into the park. What's happened? I think people are concerned about that, even though the report seems to say, well, the whole dioxin thing, that doesn't really, present that much of a problem, so let's just move on. And did you get that feeling from the report?
I got the sense that, based on the information they looked at, that there wasn't enough of a concern that they would recommend further examination of it. And that, once again, that's coming from an environmental expert, and I'm not, I'm just taking their opinion and relating it to you guys. I'm not interjecting what I feel or if they're right or wrong. I'm just stating to you what their opinion is, so.
Thanks. See, I'm looking at the various dispersion diagrams that are just a couple of pages up above that there. And it shows, the highest accumulations basically at the site proper, and then it dramatically peters out, from there to blue, which is, low concentrations, and almost basically doesn't really touch the park except in, a shade of blue. That is what they're saying is the likely deposition.
That's what the model says.
Yes, okay. We talked about the solubility or non thereof of this stuff. If it tends to stay on the ground, is there runoff characteristics from the source property into the park? Is there runoff potential that carries that deposited material, over time? Does it go down with the snow, like with a glacier? I mean, what happens with it, or does it just lay there and, have a half-life or something? I don't know, but is there contours, are there gullies, are there curbs and anything that can concentrate and direct runoff? Or is it thought to just sit there, forever? I don't know. But that's the kind of thing I'd want to test for, I guess, if there was a fear that this is material that we don't like. And yes, that shows where, its concentration could be in deposit, but then the forces of nature do what? I don't know. But this is material that we don't like, so shouldn't we be testing for it in the park? And not maybe just in one place, because why that one place, as being the most likely? Was that a wind direction? Or is that, some sort of a combination of wind direction and possible runoff, or the geology of the place, or what? I don't know what led to that recommendation. So yeah, I could see where people are saying, well, is this enough? When are we at the enough point? So.
That is the question. That's the tough question, is when everyone's enough point is different, and that's going to be the tough decision, is what is the enough point?
But I'm just thinking from our standpoint, due diligence says we should identify perhaps more, potentials than what we're seeing. I see a mammoth report that tells me there's going to be one drilling. And I'm like, and sure, the report says or infers that one drilling is in the place most likely to, represent. But how did they come to that conclusion? Was it based on wind direction solely? Was it based on other factors like, the way stuff travels in the rain, things of that nature? And, should our concerns be, as was stated, where are the people in the park? Where are they most apt to come to, contact with, the surface of the park? Where are kids most likely to be squatting down and messing about? Where do people, put down a blanket for a picnic? All those kinds of things. And shouldn't those be places where we have representational testing as well? And no, we can't test every inch of the park, but there must be some informed, further informed, instinctual testing that we would just look and go, well, I think that'd be a good spot because look, there's a hill there and a little ravine, and right up the hill we know is Wausau. And right over there was where the smokestack was, and and it seems to me like, oh, it could come down here. Let's test here, and that's where it seems kind of weird that the statement, and we kind of turned around, so it was like a positive negative. It wasn't like the city shouldn't.
Right.
It's just it wasn't recommended that the city should.
Right.
But I'm kind of like recommending that the city should talk to TRC, TL, whatever, I forget the acronym, to say, hey, we also have concerns here because of usage, and we have concerns here because of geography, you know? We know there's a ravine, we know there's a curb here that directs, you know, rainwater. We know that rainwater can run off from where we see high concentration, so where's it going, you know? And are they testing, you know, in these concentration areas to show, you know, is it really this stratified, you know, going outwards? Where I'm going with this is, you know, I don't want to be test happy, but I want to be happy about testing.
If I could react to that a little bit. I don't think that we are done with dioxin. I think I think we got a couple of questions before us, but I'm wondering if Waleco is going to be doing, aren't they going to do 25 tests, like background tests, kind of away from the area, and then they're going to do X number of data gap sampling?
I'm not exactly sure on the amount of sample. What I do, and we've referred to the one test, and this isn't that Waleco is going to do one sample as a result of this effort. There's just one of those sample points located in Riverside Park.
Okay, but it seemed to me that someplace, and this large document, that I saw that they were going to do at least 25 samples. They're going to pay $5,000 a pop for all those?
They're going to be required by DNR to investigate if they've contaminated the area, and whatever that plan they submitted to DNR was, that's what they have to do.
Okay. I would like to give Mr. Nutting a chance to speak, share his opinion, and then I would like to hear from a representative of Citizens for Clean Wausau as to what they are thinking at this point. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't really add anything additional to the esteemed comments of my fellow older persons here. They've said fairly succinctly the thoughts that the committee shares in various ways. The thoughts that come to my mind, though, is, okay, now what do we do? For instance, is a parking lot, a paved parking lot, that's a cap. And we've mitigated areas along the Wisconsin River for the River's Edge Park as a result of paving or as a result of soil removing and soil replacement. Does nature cap an area over time with the soils, the grasses dying, the leaves mulching, etc.? What does those are thoughts that come to my mind as to what lessens a risk. And we've listened to scientists say that, you know, you've got to be rolling around in it, eating it, and doing that on a consistent basis for it to literally have some effect on one's health. And surely the parents would say, hey, get up off the ground, come on. Where does it end? Yeah, we're all curious about where we should go, but yet I'm also thinking about, well, do we let that part of the park just grow wild and become inaccessible to any involvement by human movement? Do we pave it and create larger parking areas? Do we put pickleball courts there all over the place and just say, okay, we're done? Is that the cheaper route to go, or do we keep drilling and drilling and drilling and find out we're all the more curious? Yeah, we're curious about what's there, yes, but I'm also thinking about, okay, let's move on and let's deal with what we have. What are we going to do with the park? Are we going to keep it open, or are we going to close it?
Yeah.
You know, we're not experts. We're going to take the opinion of the experts and make a decision. And then we have to make a decision as to what we are going to take as the taxpayers' money to continue on this. Or do none, and just continue to roll as we have been for decades. 6 of this and half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, I'm believing, I believe in the contents of the 2 reports now that we've gotten from the Department of Health Services. And I can't pick and choose what I believe from within that report, and
that's
one of the
correct.
things they say is, if we had more testing, we'd be more sure of our results. Somebody from Citizens for Clean Wausau, maybe named Tom, I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Good evening, Tom Killian, 133 East Thomas Street, and I just have a few comments and even some questions, if those are allowed. I would like to ask Mr. Fable one question, if that's possible, and I had not asked this prior because it did not seem pertinent, but tonight being at the center of this report and some of the recommendations, I would like to ask, I'll keep it brief. I would expect it's a no, but there was a prominent member of the Crestline S&E executive team who also shared your surname, and he was Director of Manufacturing and Director of Material Management. That wasn't your father by chance, was it? Okay, thank you. So what I'd prefer is to have had that disclosed, and I'm not suggesting anything, but this is all a little too close for comfort for me, because we've got Crestline and S&E as the corporate predecessors of Waleco, and some of this burn-in goes back decades. Now we have Waleco's longtime consultant, TRC, formerly RMT. They've worked for Waleco many, many years, and now we're having them do an assessment because residents and city members, not just residents anymore, have concerns. And the DNR, we're talking about entities that have had decades to do their jobs. Decades upon decades. That's the DNR, Waleco, TRC. They've had their time, and I am not comfortable with leaving it in their hands anymore. And from what I hear tonight, it doesn't sound like you are either. And if we could please, ma'am, if we could go to page 123 on the PDF there. I'd just like to share this. I only brought one with the committee.
Nope. 123 of the packet.
Okay, that's perfect, thank you. So you'll see there they called them, the data gap areas, and where the proposed sample locations would be for Waleco's aerial deposition study. There is one, and you'll note that it's kind of in the kind of northeast area of that little triangle there in the park. Now, I agree with Mr. Neal and others that there should be, I think, multiple samples in the park, but that particular area, I mean, it may just be a matter of bad luck, and I would assume it is, but when you look at the satellite images of the park from 1998, for example, and that's actually in the phase one because they put historic satellite imagery, that's like one of the only areas of the park where apparent large-scale excavation has occurred in that area. So it's a really unfortunate place to sample, because it looks like, based on satellite data, that by 1998 that had already been excavated there, their proposed boring location. What you also see, and I'm very sensitive to the fact that you don't want to get into the larger neighborhood issue and just stick to the park, is you will see that there really aren't any more samples there on Thomas Street or River Street or those areas where we know there have been exceedances of dioxins based on DNR standards, and they're calling the other areas data gaps. Frankly, that whole neighborhood is a data gap, because they were going to test the surface of the soil, and I think at some point the toxicologist had said, let's try 2 or 3 inches, because that's true surface, and that hadn't been done before. In that vein, the whole neighborhood's a data gap, because I don't recall any true surface tests in that context being done. There was near-surface tests. So all in all, I guess I'd just like to say that, I thank the committee for taking this on, but I think we need to step away from Waleco and TRC. I mean, even this, that was an oversight, in my opinion. If you pick a spot in the park that satellite imagery shows had been excavated prior, my confidence suddenly goes way down. So I would like, if possible, it'd be great to use a third party who's not working for the potential responsible party, whoever, maybe it's REI, I don't know, but I don't like the idea of using the potentially responsible party's own consultant. And I think there should be multiple tests done in the park, and this is the DNR's issue, but we had hoped with this aerial deposition, we were going to actually get some tests in our neighborhood and people's yards. They're not going to do that. It's very disappointing. But I think for the park, looking at least the point, and it goes across the whole area where there was the demolition of former industrial properties, looking at where that runoff would actually land from that slope. If we could get multiple samples along that runoff area to start, then I think at least the committee and the city and the people may know, are there dioxin exceedances in the most likely spot with the runoff. That's my opinion, and I'll underscore I'm a layman, but thank you.
Thank you for your time, Thomas. Somebody else? If you can be brief, a couple of us have got another meeting at 6, so
So do I.
we're gonna.
Judith Miller, 903 Kickbush Street. First of all, I entirely agree with Mr. Killian. Second of all, I would point out in that, I'm sure you're aware, they struck groundwater on Thomas Street far above the level they expected when starting their road reconstruction. I would point out that many, the data that has been submitted here, first of all, seems based on what the DNR wants Waleco to do, which doesn't have much to do with Riverside Park and the dioxin deposition that may be there. Second of all, that the data in question is largely decades old. If you look at Thomas Street, how long ago was it that Thomas Street was laid, which was the last time it was completely excavated, 50, 60 years ago? The data that on which hypotheses were based is extremely out of date. I would point out that so is much of the data that relates to Riverside Park as to what contamination is there. I'd highly recommend that the city do more testing, and thank you all for supporting that.
Thank you. I think I would put 2 questions to the committee. I will tell you what the 2 questions are, and we can deal with them one at a time and maybe wrap this up. I would like to know if the committee would like to ask Mr. Lassa or somebody else, but he would be the most likely person. Would the committee like to ask him to make recommendations for spots where there would be further surface testing done of the same type of tests that Waleco is having done for the aerial deposition stuff? And then a separate question, would the committee like to ask Mr. Lassa for recommendations on subsurface testing to look for the presence of dioxins, not groundwater. I think we know pretty much what's in the groundwater. We got the groundwater wells. I would like to hear, and maybe I can get that on my own, but I would like to know what the groundwater monitoring wells, what the trends have been, the 5 that are in the park, but separate issue. So does the committee want to ask Mr. Lassa for recommendations on surface testing, first 1 to 3 inches in connection with the Waleco, and do we further want to have soil testing done further down, and we'd have to, get his expert recommendation on how far to go. So surface testing? Who's
I think
up for it?
I think the
say
answer is
yes.
yes. The answer is yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion to that effect?
I
Is
will.
that you?
Mr. Smith?
First and second? Okay. And the motion is to ask Mr. Lassa to come in here and discuss with us his recommendation on what further testing should be done on that park, on the surface.
That's correct.
Any comments on that before we vote?
Well,
Yes.
just a question. If REI, I'm not sure if Mr., if that's his calling, so to speak, or does REI have other people within the stable that would be able to provide that information? I think
I
that
think
we're
we
asking.
have an expert in the front row who can solicit the proper person to give us that recommendation.
And that very well may be Mr., so be it then.
Okay, so it would be a recommendation from Mr. Lassa or somebody of
No.
else who's recommended. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm aye too, that's unanimous. How about, do you want to throw in a request for a recommendation and discussion on subsurface testing for dioxins and probably heavy metals? Motion by Smith, second by Gisselman. Comments?
I thought that would be part of the discussion.
It is, but I think we're doing two different things. We're tying in with Waleco's project of the aerial deposition stuff, and then we're looking at the stuff that we knew about a year and a half ago that, is a concern in the soil from the runoff and the groundwater, blah, blah, blah. Comments, questions? Good to go?
Well, it
Yes.
only makes sense to me because, if you go into the doctor for a checkup, he doesn't just check you out for one thing, he checks you out for a variety of
Let's
things.
see what else we got here.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Just to clarify, we're just asking, I know you have to vote on the second one yet, but we're asking them just to give us recommendation at this time, and then we'll obviously have to get a cost estimate for the numbers of samples that he recommends, correct, before we'd move forward with anything else?
Yeah,
That's the next
that
step.
would be my question too. Do you just want staff to go ahead and get those recommendations with the cost estimates and stuff and then bring it forward for financial approval? Or do you want it to come back here to,
I think it wants to come back to this committee, because, if the recommendation comes back that we want 2 tests, then maybe we aren't going to be satisfied with that. So I think we'd like to hear a recommendation from a professional as to what more we could do. And then I think we want to either accept or modify that suggestion.
I just don't want to get tied up in a committee where everybody's got an opinion on where a test should be and then we kind of just get nowhere. So
I think what we would do is say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We wouldn't, I personally, if somebody said, X number of feet out, and then, the logical thing then would be to go 200 feet, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Mr. Nutting?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this would be something that would have to come back to council, and then I would hate to have it hashed out for another hour, hour and a half at council while we have to educate the rest of the council. Maybe that this ought to come back to a committee of the whole, where the committee of the whole would be informed and air it out so that it would be able to, if a vote for spending the taxpayers' monies and whatever amount that might be would eventually come to council as a whole, but to educate the council as a whole would need to take place prior to a council vote. Because here's 4 individuals of the 11, but not everybody's going to get the grasp of it all by just reading the notes, and so.
Yeah, I think that idea has merit. Why don't we vote on whether or not we want to look into the subsurface testing, and then I will check with the council president and the mayor to see if they want to do it at a committee of the whole, because otherwise, you know, it is a good point. In order to get the money, we're probably going to have to go to finance, and then have to go to council.
Okay.
Any further questions on the issue of seeking a recommendation on additional soil testing, subsurface for dioxins, et cetera? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Me too, it's unanimous, thank you very much. And good work, and we will check into the committee of the whole issue and see if we can move a little more quickly. I think this was time well spent, it's a big issue, don't regret a minute of it, so. Did I get my computer to wake up again?
Mr. Chairman, another suggestion I would make, that anytime we have a matter that has 144 pages, we might want to put that last on the agenda so you don't have to page through all of it to get to some of the other matters.
But it was most important.
And I hope that whoever did this report, we're not paying them by the word, or we're going to have to issue another bond issue to pay it off.
I agree, that was pretty incredible. Okay. Jamie, I believe, would like us to talk about proposed capital improvement projects, and all these are going to be real easy compared to what we just dealt with.
Yes, a lot of them you've seen before, but I'll go through them as they are in the packet, and you can ask any questions that you might have. These we have to bring forward at this month's meeting because finance is requesting all of them tomorrow to start getting through the process, and then they'll go through the process as in a year. So the first one in the packet that we have, that's a new item this year that hasn't been brought forward to you before. And we did include some pictures in the packet too that I know were on one document, but there are some pictures right after this one of the parking lot. So this is the Sylvan Hill parking lot reconstruction right outside of the chalet at Sylvan Hill. It is a parking lot that was reconstructed once, I believe about 15 to 20 years ago is what I've been told, and so it's just not one that has, it's lived its life, and it needs some updating to it. So we did get a cost estimate from our street department on the repaving of this lot, and it is approximately $125,000 to redo the entire lot. It's a pretty big lot. It's kind of like a gravel parking lot in some spots right now. It is supposed to be paved, but you'll see this is also the entrance road going in to Sylvan Hill Chalet area with a big parking lot there. So this is an item, we wanted to get it in front of you, get it on the schedule, whether it's approved for this year or going out, it's something that at some point, if we want it to be a paved lot again, would have to be addressed.
I would ask do we need a parking lot this large? Is that a assumption going in? Okay. Do you want you want a motion when we've heard each of these, or would you like a motion on each one? Or are we
I guess
just
that's your
listening?
call. I guess that would be the committee's decision, if you want to do them all together, if it's something, or if there's one that you have an
Would you
issue
like
with that you don't want
motions
to
from
put
us, or are
forward.
you informing us unless we want to modify these?
No, I would like a motion from you to move them forward.
Okay.
Yes.
So motion to move this forward? Because I think there may be issues with individual ones, but I'll make the motion to move this one
So you want
forward
to do the
individually.
Sylvan Hill by itself, and you're moving, and Mr. Neal just shook his head like he's seconding that? Any other
Yes.
questions on this one?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
This is Sylvan Hills, right? Does this does this parking lot get used year-round, or just mostly in the wintertime when we're running the tubing hill and so on?
No, it's used year-round. That chalet that we have there is rented out quite often for picnics, the family picnics,
Okay.
birthdays. We have the playground there, that's just to the bottom of that picture, as well as there's mountain biking trails, hiking trails, so it is used year-round.
All right, so we're voting on moving this forward. Is this budgeted something we have to put in the next budget, or is there money in this budget for it?
These that you're looking at right now are all capital improvement projects that will go through the capital improvement process. So we
Okay.
will present Ours and every department will present them to the council as a whole, and that's where you'll know what amount of money you have to spend and you'll prioritize your
Okay.
projects.
All
So
right.
this is
Thank
one
you.
of those.
Thank you.
Questions or comments? Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, me too. There's unanimous approval of that one. Next.
Okay. The next one in your packet is a tennis course replacement program. This is not the first time that you've seen this one. It has come through. It actually is something we've been, along with this one and the playground item that's in your packet as well. These are ongoing maintenance items that we have been completing over the last couple of years. We have phased in instead of doing all of the tennis courts at one time, we are looking at them individually, and we have them on a schedule. So this year, you'll see in the project replacement schedule box that for 2020, it would be Memorial Park, for 2021, Alexander Airport Park, and for 2022, Oak Island Park. We also do look at these tennis courts to make sure that they are something that we want to continue to have in our system, that people do use them. If they can be converted, we do have some areas where we're converting some tennis courts. I think they're mainly on the county side to pickleball courts, but we'd go through that evaluation at that time. This year, Pleasant View Tennis Court is being completed, and 3M Tennis Court is being completed as well on this schedule. So this is to continue this schedule for the next 3 years. I believe it is almost complete. I think 2022 or possibly 2023, I have to go back at my notes, is the last year. I think 2022 is, or I would have included another year on there. So I think we're up to
And we
date
get some
then.
years off, huh?
Yes. So this is to
Move to approve.
resurface.
Second, Mr. Nutting. Any comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We go there. We're clipping right along.
Before I get to the playground one that I just mentioned, this one you've also seen is the Memorial Park seawall. So this one helped to put some pictures in the packet as well. It's just a 520 linear feet of the Memorial Park seawall that we wanted to take out the concrete part of it and replace it with riprap to have it be more stable. It is failing in many of the areas. It's been this way for a while. You've seen this a number of times.
I think it's rattier than those photos indicate.
Yeah, the
I
photos
mean,
don't
it's
do it
getting
justice.
undercut, so you're not sure when you want to really walk on that sidewalk.
We have to be careful because otherwise Memorial Park is going to go away. So I think we have to, I mean, this has been on the list now for quite a while, and I think
Yeah.
we really have to be,
Yeah. So my
do our
question,
due diligence in that.
you're going to replace it with riprap so it would look kind of like the shoreline at Oak Island?
Correct, yes,
Okay, and River Life?
yes.
Okay.
correct.
Are you making that motion too?
Yes.
You're on a run. Mr. Smith is seconding. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
District 1 thanks you.
The next one is also a continuation from the last couple of years. We had 13 playgrounds to replace, and I think we are completed in 2022 to replace those. This year, we are replacing Pleasant View and Schofield Park, along with Oak Island Park, but Oak Island Park is being done through the Community Development Block Grant Fund as a community, and I think we'll continue to apply for that fund as well to help move these parks along. But this is a continuation of that. And next year is Forest Park Playground on the docket to replace that. As you'll see, we used to have 75,000 in the budget. We did put that up to 95,000 based on the cost of equipment and the sizes of the playgrounds with the footprints. Some of the parks will be less, some will be more. Usually we do 2 parks with that 75. For Forest Park, we could possibly do another park, so we'll look at our plan to see as well what other park is next, and I'm sorry that I don't have that on here. But if we have another smaller park, we could probably do both with that 95 as well, as we've been doing 2 playgrounds this year. But we want to try to, the goal is to replace the playgrounds with playgrounds that will, the kids won't get bored with after the first time playing on. And the smaller neighborhood parks that just have a small structure replaced, just because we can replace the playground doesn't mean it will have value to it. So I think we need to really look at what we're replacing these playgrounds with and what age groups we're focusing on and do it correctly.
Mr. Nutting?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The neighbors of the West, I believe it's the West East group that is concerned about the Reservoir Park
Reservoir,
up there
correct.
and the age-appropriate nature of the equipment there. I'm hopeful that that is being addressed with something that brings the ability of the equipment to a lower aged individual.
Yep, it's correct. What we're doing with that right now, in the immediate, is we're replacing the slide that's put out there so that there's one with easier access to the slides that the little kids. We were out there to do it a few days ago, and realized we need a backhoe to get those existing footings out, and our backhoe is a little bit busy at the time of the tree removals that we've had to do with the down trees. But that is first on our docket, is to get that in. We did put an infant swing out there as well. I think for that park, we need to look long-term at expanding the footprint of the park. It's a very small footprint because it's built into the side of that hill, and that's what will have to be done to expand it. But those are the immediate changes we're doing so that it is a little bit more usable. But that brought up, it was an eye-opener for me coming in last year. That park was already ordered. But now, as we look at Pleasant View, I just actually met with our operations manager today, looking at Pleasant View and Schofield and trying to determine what age groups we're going to do. I think we're going to move to our RFPs to include 2 to 12-year-old play equipment. So, and especially at Schofield Park, we've noticed that in there, we only have infant swings based upon the requests of the community, because the majority of the people that use that playground are the little tykes of their older brother or sisters playing on the ball field. You know, so the older kids aren't using that park as much as the younger kids. So we don't even have an older kid swing there, which has just been a request of the community over time. So that's what we're going to address these a little bit better, I hope. And we're in the Forest Park area, where there's an active neighborhood group, just as I wish we would have done with the Westies, had we done that a year later. We're getting the neighborhood involved earlier on so that they can have some input on what their demographics of their area is today, who's going to use it. If there's a lot of younger kids, then we gear more towards that. They're all going to get older, but these neighborhood playgrounds kind of cycle through as the kids grow and then new kids come in. So that's been a good experience to see what do they want to see in their playground within reason. So.
Well, in some of those cases, the user might have been someone who was conducting a child care operation. Well, those can come and go.
Right.
We're not to build for a specific child care operation, which happens to go there every day, and then they're out of business, and well, then that need is, but it should have a generic, okay, here, this 2 to 12, you know, a couple swings, this, and,
Yep.
yeah, thank you so much for that consideration.
You're welcome.
So we are going to be able to, you know, before I go toes up, replace that ladder on that slide, right?
Yes, it should be done as soon as our backhoe is available to help us.
It seems to be more complex than when we first put a man on the moon. It's taken, I know that we had wet weather, but now it's dry, and now we've, you know, city only has one backhoe, maybe we ought to buy another backhoe.
No, I think we have only a few people qualified to operate the backhoe, I think is where our restrictions are coming in right now. But it's at the top of our list, so we will get there. Yes.
That's good to hear.
You have a dedication ceremony up there, Dennis? About party.
We will get it done.
You have a motion on that? Is there a sentiment to approve? We have a motion by Mr. Parks, Gary Gisselman. Second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor say aye. We're doing well. And the dog park is next, and my question is that all you're asking for?
Well, so what I did with this one, I didn't quite know what to put on here. We can update this, we can change this, we can do whatever. You know, the subcommittee was put together to fundraise for the park because it wasn't funded last year. The hopes of the committee, of the subcommittee, is that they can do a portion of the park this year. So we had the group put together their phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 items that they wanted to have done. What I did in here was put together, these are the numbers from the Phase 2 items, with the thinking that hopefully the group gets the funding for the Phase 1 items this year already, and those are already done. So that is, it's up for discussion. That's where my reasoning and my numbers came from, is that spreadsheet the committee put together.
Do we have a reaction from the chair of the Dog Park Special Committee? That sounds like a good plan to you?
Well, I certainly welcome including this in the CIP and can only, hope it makes it above the line this time.
I think the ask
We're
is
looking
much
at the
smaller.
committee, itself through fundraising efforts, raising, the majority of the monies and perhaps there might be some involvement from the city to help that move along.
I would think this amount should win easy approval. Is there a motion to approve this? Mr. Neal? Mr. Nutting? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, comments, questions? All those in favor say aye. Thank you very much. Me too, unanimous. And we're going to go back now. Where are we going? Oh, rolling stock, sorry.
So the
Didn't
last-
mean to rush that one.
No, last item is an annual allocation that we bring forward just for approval. It is something that goes through a little bit differently than the capital improvement projects, but it is brought forward for, this is our vehicle replacement schedule that we have all of our vehicles on multi-year schedules. It's 50% cost share between the city and the county. The county's park commission did recommend to move their 50% forward last month, so it'll go to the ERC committee on Thursday. This looks like a really long list compared to last year, and it just happened to be that we purchased a lot of our trucks. They're lower cost. This year we only purchased a piston bully and a dump truck, but the cost of those two really large items were the same amount as what all of these trucks are. So it's our replacement schedule of when the trucks were purchased, that they're all on this plan. So it's the same amount as last year. It's the same amount that it's been going forward for 50% of city share.
Motion by Mr. Gisselman, second by Mr. Neal. Hearing no, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Very good. Keep you under, wheels under you. Okay, I think we can move right along. Setting grand opening celebration date for River Life Park. I know there was some indecision on that. Did you land on a suggested date?
I'm actually going to ask the committee if we can postpone this for 1 month to July. We were going to recommend July 8th, but talking with our committee today, and then I also got some news this afternoon. Mayor hasn't heard this yet, so I apologize. No, I think this is a good, we just want to make sure that all of our donors are recognized properly. And there's some lead time on the really nice plaques that we're getting. And although we think that we were going to suggest July 8th, which we think we can very well meet, what we don't want to be doing is having the grand opening and then for some reason they're not ready. The engraving, the Wausau Awards and engraving who we're going through right now is very, very busy with end of the year school awards. So they can't even meet with us for a week or two to verify all of the plaques. And like I said, although they said they could probably get it done by July 8th, I would rather not push it. So I think if we could put this on our July agenda we'll still have what this doesn't do is, as soon as the fence is down and the park is complete, it will be open to the public. There'll be, kind of a soft opening. But I think when we want to have a grand opening is we want to have all of our donors recognized, and I would suggest that being in early August. So I think we can set that date at our July meeting if that's okay with the mayor. And
Does the committee feel a need to be involved in the selection of the date for that event, or should we just
or we can,
ask to have it happen at the earliest convenience?
okay, we can do that too.
Very good.
Yep.
Thank you. Open and transparent, right?
Okay, then we will do that.
That was a joke. Very good. Educational items, Dog Park Special Committee update. We can go right to Mr. Neal.
Well, I hope our committee members are in the next room awaiting our meeting. We will be sharing at that meeting a list of about 50 or 51 potential donors, which we're looking at They're ready, yes. Could you tell them that we're getting close? Yeah, we're getting close. To divvy up these donor targets and go to them. We had hoped to have the Community Foundation of North Central Wisconsin provide fund management services for us to essentially be the person or the place where people would send their check. There's been a hiccup there with their board in approving that fund management. So I'm going to recommend it to our group tonight that we start off by directing any donors to send their checks to Marianne Grote. Marianne already knows that she might have monies coming her way, and she will put them in the appropriate envelope. And that's that. Other than what I updated last month, that's where we're at tonight, so.
Very good. We are, a few other things going on in the background, but nothing the committee needs to worry about. Ms. Polly, you want to do program update?
Sure, we just have a couple, if there's any questions, I can go through this really briefly, but we just gave you an update on some of the things happening. Some of the, at 400 block items are all going to be starting. We're going to be becoming very, very busy here. We've got the Classic Car Show on the 16th, and then summer kickoff, just as a note, we wanted to let everybody know, I think it's been advertised pretty well, but it is typically at Oak Island Park. It's been moved to Marathon Park on June 14th. And then shelter reservations are very busy. Going to project updates?
Yes, please.
And then for project updates, we did ask from Mr. Neal at the last meeting to give an update on the Stewart Park pillars. We did talk with the contractor. They are working, they're 95% finished on that finial. They had to reconstruct it over the winter. They have one more coat to put on it, and then it will be completed. They'll be installing it. They are finishing up at another historic site in town, so they will be, they plan to be on site June 15th, and we'll work with them exactly where the pillars are going to be moved back to and constructed, so you can watch for that.
What is the coat they're putting on it? Is some kind of weatherproofing stuff, or?
I believe so, but I can find out.
Sealant of some
Yeah,
kind?
because it's concrete.
Okay, don't need to dig, but curious.
And then I mentioned the 3M court resurfacing. The other items is the storm cleanup. More trees went down than we thought would. We didn't realize the winds were as bad as they were on May 28th when we had a number down in the parks and in the streets. So we're still working on that, getting all of our water systems up to date. Athletic Park had some work done to it, but it was ready for the opener this last weekend for the Woodchucks. We did have the Wausau East, Wausau West game there on May 7th. River Life Park, we're keeping that going. Contractor is moving. The Port and Place surfacing is complete. If you go down there, you'll see all the cool colors. The turf in the challenge course should be done by tomorrow. They were on site over the weekend. And then the rest of the items need to be done is basically the landscaping part of it. And then some routine maintenance. Excuse me.
Just information from the community, there has been a request that the department consider fencing part of the River Life Park, like the area where there's play equipment for really young children because of the proximity of the river, and the department is evaluating that. And we got no money for it, but we'll see where that goes.
Well, and one item with that, the playground isn't really separated into the age groups. There's small items for younger kids, and then bigger items and smaller items, so there isn't a specific area for, the little
Okay.
kids versus the
It
bigger
might
ones.
make more difficult, but suggestions for next week, next time?
We did have a brief conversation the other day about street trees and best practices to protect them during reconstruction of sidewalks and whatnot. Hearkening back to the unfortunate dropping of a tree onto a truck, and that was directly next to a sidewalk that had just been replaced, and the large roots were totally severed to get them out of the way for the sidewalk. And naturally, when the wind blew, that tree blew the other way right onto a vehicle, smashing it really, really good. So I want to bring this back to us because we've talked to this at length, but what we do not have is formalized language for contractors. And I want to drive home our concerns and put some teeth into our contracts.
Can I speak to that real quick? So, Mr. Neal, one thing I want to or I will work on this with Mr. Lindman. We will bring it forward, as he mentioned in an email. I don't think it went out to the entire committee, but Mr. Lindman has hired an outside consultant to help with putting together specifications, a forestry specifications manual for our city street trees, specifically too when it comes to construction, which I believe this is addressed. It's in draft form right now. He's continuing to work on it. He's working as well with our city forester. So I think the timing should be fairly soon of when that's ready. I don't know if it'll be ready for July, but probably within the next couple of months. I think that manual is probably best to bring back and include those items. So when that's ready, that'll be, I think, what you're looking for to bring back.
Yeah, and for the rest of the committee, Tom included me because I was the chair of the committee on his inquiry about this, but apparently what happened was a couple of years ago, we had a fellow from Milwaukee come up here. They called him the tree cop, I believe, and no street project happened without this guy reviewing it and looking at each tree that they were proposing to cut. And it all sounded great, and we thought, well, we could build on that, and blah, blah, blah. And it turned out that after he went back to Milwaukee, we pretty much never heard from him again, and you couldn't pry any information out of him if you wanted to. So it kind of, didn't bear the fruit that we were expecting. Yes, Mr. Gistelman.
Well, I'm really disappointed because I see that we have a variety of constructions this year going on, and the nice maples on Town Line are already gone. Who knows what's going to be happening on First Avenue?
I can tell you what's going to be happening.
and,
Every tree on First Avenue every tree has a pink X on it. And I'm just curious as to who could I talk to? Because there are some that have been planted, they're probably 20 years in age, and they have a nice, they're not monsters, they're maturing. I'm wondering if those trees really do need to have to go, or I guess I should see how the boulevard is going to be reconstructed, and the boulevard is probably moving as a result, but I'd have to see what that actual plan looks like. We know that obviously there's some very mature trees that at any given moment seek to land on a car, or my car included, took the
I think if you have concerns, just, make a list of the ones that you would like to be reviewed.
Yes.
And get it to
I'll get it to the
Forrester
proper
and
guy, yeah.
Eric and,
You can send it to me, and then I will either send it to Blaine or Eric. When it comes to the street reconstruction, Mr. Lindman does have all of those plans, and he is having our city forester as well as this consultant look at any street reconstructions. They, worked on Thomas Street together, working on First Town Line. So I can relay those and get it to the right person.
Thank you.
I just want to add that, as this manual is being put together, I mean, this is really policy, and I cannot stress too much the heartfelt talks we had here, and not just heartfelt, but we were very pragmatic in terms of the known fiscal value of a tree canopy in a city. Its value exceeds what people might possibly even imagine. And when standard practice for street reconstruction is the first thing you knock down all the bloody trees, that is not what came out of this committee. The whole point of our meetings and discussions were to make sure that that doesn't happen, that trees become a priority. Knowing, yes, some have to go, but not just draw a straight line and they all go because they're in the way and makes it easier for us to do our job. And it cannot be for convenience, it has to be a priority to save our canopy because for, as I said, very pragmatic reasons and aesthetic reasons, it needs to be protected. So I
we
hope
should
the
try to
manual
do
is
our best.
very adamant along those lines. It should be our philosophy and our stated policy.
Very good. Any other items for next time? Feel free to contact either of us if you would like to have something. Otherwise, I would entertain a
Move to
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn, and I believe we have one. We have a second from Mr. Neal. Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. Thank you for your time and attention.